Mercury in Scorpio is the mind as an alchemist, turning truth into gold and illusion into wisdom. What surfaces now is not here to destroy you, but rather to free you. And by the end of this month, as the grand water trine unfolds, everything you've unearthed will begin to flow again. Mercury will be in Scorpio from October 6th to October 29th. This month is a Scorpio month. We have the sun moving into Scorpio on the 23rd. Mars is in Scorpio all month. In my Substack, I talked a little bit about the October astrology, and I said that this month is about having the courage to see in the dark. Mars, our planet of action and conflict and assertion and war, is moving into the sign of depth and transformation, death and rebirth. When Mercury moves here, it's adding a intellectual depth, a mental depth, and obviously some other aspects. What's really interesting about Mercury in Scorpio is that at the end of the month, we're gonna have this beautiful grand water trine that's pretty rare. Mercury will be in Scorpio along with Mars, and then we'll have Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces, and Jupiter in Cancer creating this triangle in the sky. We're going to talk about that a little bit today and how right now you can start preparing for the integration that can come, the emotional wisdom that can come through what you see now. But keep that in mind that this is building to something greater. Now, in my Substack, I also mentioned how I'm doing my Mapping the Shadow workshop, which I'm so excited about. I call it a workshop, but it's really intensive. And really, I don't like the word masterclass, but it is kind of like a mini course. Mapping the shadows is one of my 3 pillars of my work. I wanted to do mapping the shadows during Scorpio season. It just makes so much sense. We're going into the shadows. This is the sign of the underworld after all. And Pluto, the ruler of the underworld, is going direct this month as well. I talked a little bit about that in my Substack. So this Mapping the Shadow workshop I'm so excited for it. I want to do it tomorrow, honestly, if I could. I've synthesized astrology and human design and shadow work, depth psychology, and created this process that I use for myself and for my clients. And it's about having discovery and awareness, right? So the 3 pillars of my work is really discovery and awareness, which is mapping the shadow. The second pillar is integration, which is the turning triggers into gold. And then the third pillar is creation, which is the workshop I'll be doing in December. So this one is really for us to kind of have this map, this discovery process that brings insight and awareness as to where the shadows are. Mercury in Scorpio is a perfect time to do this work because, the workshop's on the 25th. I'm going to put a video at the end of this video that's going to talk more about this workshop, but I just want to give some context as to why I decided to do the workshop right now, because it's literally the whole sky is conspiring for us to look beneath the surface. This is not the time for anything surface oriented. Nothing on the surface survives during Scorpio season, right? We're being called to emotional alchemy. We're being called to great depths. I'll teach you how to synthesize this. It's 80 minutes. I'll do a live demo, unlimited Q&A. I stay until all questions are answered because I want to support those who support me. And I really appreciate everybody who does support me, especially as I've been in this transition mode. It's just really, I just want to make sure that you guys have this. And this is going to be a big one. Like my workbook, you're going to get a workbook. It's very robust, but it's not mindless information. It's something that you can come back to, tools that you can come back to for many different scenarios. It's happening October 25th, so right in the middle of this grand water trend that I'm talking about. If you're interested in that workshop, I have a ton of details on my website. I'll have the link down below. Let's get into this video. Mercury in Scorpio, the mind in the shadows. Things that are moving into Scorpio, all those planets, Mars already did this, as they move into Scorpio, initially because Pluto is at the very beginning of Aquarius, they're going to square off with Pluto. So not only is Mercury in Scorpio, but it's also squaring off with Pluto immediately on October 6th, 7th, 8th. It's going to conjunct Mars on the 20th of October. And then it's going to start entering into this grand water trine that I mentioned from the 23rd until about the 29th, where it will then move into Sagittarius, but Mars will still have that activation of that grand water trine. Water is emotion. Water is feeling. This is emotional alchemy. When we think about Hermes or Mercury, Mercury is a psychopomp, meaning that he was one who transported souls down to the underworld for Hades or Pluto. It is not common, actually it doesn't exist, to have a god like Mercury who could travel in between the worlds. He could go into Olympus, he could be on Earth, he could go in the underworld with no issues whatsoever. This is how he became a messenger of sorts. And in a lot of ways, Mercury is always in these in-between spaces. He becomes this alchemist because he marries the material with the air, the underworld with the material. He's able to traverse all these different things. And when he moves into Scorpio, he tends to stay underwater, exploring depth, exploring transformation, exploring the occult, exploring the meaning beyond the surface. This is not a time for us to think about how our lives look on the outside. It's so important when Mercury is in Scorpio is like, how does this feel to me? If we think about Mercury being thoughts, communication, learning, skills, perception, and Scorpio being the unseen, transformation, taboo, you can start to think why this is as intense as it may seem. Not only can we have that intensity in our minds, but in our words as well. We're cutting to the truth of the matter here. We're trying to get to the root of something, but we're still in the early phases of this bigger emotional story, because by the end of the month, we're going to have that grand water trine. And that's when what we see and perceive now begins to actually flow and integrate into some sort of emotional wisdom. So this is my homework for you right now. As Mercury is going through Scorpio, especially in the very beginning, I want you to just become super aware of what you're noticing. I'm a big fan of journaling, not even necessarily just sitting down and doing the journaling, which I do. And right now I'm doing my morning pages again. If you know From the Artist's Way, that's a great book. But even throughout the day, what am I perceiving? What am I hearing? What am I speaking? What keeps coming up again and again and again? Speaking of things coming up again and again and again, it's very likely with Mercury square Pluto and Mercury in Scorpio that your mind can obsess over certain things. I know a little bit about this because I have Mercury opposite Pluto in Scorpio, and it's right on top of my angles on my IC and my MC. I've always had this very obsessive part of my mind. Mercury Pluto energy together is like a detective. So even if you have like Mercury trine Pluto, the hard aspects, especially conjunction, opposition, square, you probably resonate with a lot of this Mercury and Scorpio things. I could never let go of a question until I found the truth. It was like I kept having to dig and dig and dig. And that's very classic Mercury Pluto situation. It's really a detective mind. It's like figuring things out, which is why I love the name Mapping the Shadow, because it's like, it's like you're a detective on the hunt for something, you know? Honestly, I credit a lot of how I was able to heal multiple autoimmune disorders and my chronic pain to this obsessiveness of refusing to accept surface level explanation of why all of a sudden 18 I had 4 autoimmune disorders. You know, I refused to take that, and I was like, no, I'm gonna figure out what's happening here. But that same mind, as you can probably guess, can spiral, right? It can create so much mental tension. I also talk about this opposition being really big in my chart, and this comes through with Mercury Scorpio too, is having that mental tension, because there's such a power in the way that we communicate, in the way that we think. And sometimes that can mean overpowering others around us, right? We think about Scorpio, the energy of Scorpio is really about emotional power, right? There are power struggles that happen here, and a lot of them are subconscious because Pluto's here. Pluto rules Scorpio, and Pluto is the subconscious. Something to definitely watch for as well when you're having conversations with other people. How much of it is about you trying to maintain some sort of emotional power? Because on the flip side of this, Mercury in Scorpio in general is here for raw intimacy, vulnerability. But in order to get there, they have to go through the shadow of betrayal and rejection and pain, being protective, having that scorpion tail, the stinger. At its highest level though, Scorpio is the phoenix. When the mind in Scorpio is not directed to transformation, it can start eating itself from the inside out. And this is the shadow of Mercury in Scorpio that we're going to be facing during this time. So let's just put some of the pieces of the puzzle together. Mercury's in Scorpio, squares Pluto. On the 13th of this month, Pluto turns direct, giving us the go-ahead to start moving toward what we've been uncovering about our deep desires, the transformations that we need in our lives, this underworld that we've gone into to figure out, depending on where Pluto and Aquarius is in your chart, of what we need to transform, what needs to die so something new can be reborn. Now we're getting the go-ahead to start moving on those things rather than just deeply working with them more so internally. Then we've got the sun moving into Scorpio on the 23rd. The 23rd is actually an interesting day. We've got the sun in Scorpio, the moon is in Scorpio, Mercury in Scorpio, Mars, Lilith is still there. And then, of course, that all that energy is entering that grand water trine. So the 23rd specifically is like amazing, right? It's like, I mean, there's depth there. Wherever you have Scorpio in your chart is being lit up in that moment. And then this grand trine, let's just talk a little bit about that, because this is like a very rare current of emotional intelligence and spiritual integration happening all at once. This is the alchemy of emotion, the alchemy of the feeling nature, right? In Jungian psychology, water is the cognitive function of feeling. The moment when what's been stirred and what we've perceived and the ways that we've been moving in the world somehow find direction and form. I don't want to get too much into it because I really do want to talk about this more in depth, but Scorpio penetrates, Saturn dissolves, and Cancer heals. Cancer holds it all. And together in this trine, they create this movement without the chaos. It is emotion with purpose. If we come back today, how can we best prepare ourselves for this moment? And I'll talk about in that video why it's so important to not just know about any transit really, but specifically trines. Mercury will be giving us the language to what was once unspeakable. We're going into the underworld of our minds. How can you best assist this process rather than resist it? And if your mind is feeling more obsessive or heavier or more intense right now, remember that this is a form of descent for Mercury, and that it's not necessarily just a breakdown, but a breakthrough, right? When we think about October, just tying this back to the beginning of this video, when we think about October being the courage to see in the dark, the mind is a big part of that. The perception, the awareness, the understanding, like, oh, this very thing that I've been avoiding is actually the very thing that is here to liberate me. It's here to give me freedom. How can I have more courage to move through that? This is what shadow work really looks like, letting the mind descend and come back up with the gold, right? So this is our goal during this transit. Let Mercury show you what's been hiding beneath the surface. I'll see you next time. Let's talk about my upcoming intensive class, Mapping the Shadow Using Astrology and Human Design. If you're familiar with my work, shadow work or depth psychology, astrology and human design are really the foundations of a lot of what I do. Now, in my previous workshop, I taught the integration aspect, the somatic aspect of how I turn triggers into gold, how I alchemize those emotional triggers into something that is actually our soul's path. And in this workshop, we're going to talk about the discovery process, the awareness process, how we get insight on not only how to move this shadow, move the triggers through the body, but where do they come from? What do they mean? And how can I better alchemize this, knowing that they might have a place that they originated from? It's my unique process, my unique synthesis of astrology, human design, and shadow work, depth psychology, or specifically the shadow aspect. In this framework, Mapping the Shadow, there are even smaller frameworks that I created that I want to offer to you guys so that you can do this work on your own as well and better be able to even figure out what it is that you want in your life, right? When we're doing shadow work, the goal of shadow work is wholeness, it's integration, it's individuation. Shadows are not bad. They're not something we need to get rid of. They're something that we need to see and deeply relate to and understand, because in these shadows, these are the hidden parts of ourselves that we lost long ago, that were covered up by the conditioning of our society, of our family. You hear this often, that 95% of our lives are actually run by the subconscious. And this is so true. We walk around in our lives wanting certain things, desiring certain things, but the shadow is lurking in the background, making us feel like we're not safe to want the thing that we want. We can't move forward, and it's always in some ways bringing us back to past patterns. This leaves us confused. It leaves us feeling stuck. It leaves us feeling frustrated. It makes us lose trust in ourselves because we don't know why we can't create the lives that we want. So this is a necessary part of this. It's the descent is only the beginning. The descent is what the mind and the body must travel through before we can move forward with the light. So that's what we're going to be focusing on during this mapping the shadow. You'll learn how to navigate the shadows in your chart, how to find them in your chart, cross-referencing between astrology and human design, so that this doesn't feel like a conglomerated mess of things that you have to go through, right? Because it's like, how do we synthesize? Well, lucky for you, my brain is wired for synthesis. I love putting frameworks together. I love bringing different things in and seeing how they overlap, and reminding us in that way how everything is truly connected, and learning how we can use these shadows as a way to alchemize our lives into becoming more authentic and creative beings. It's almost like we're navigating these caves, this underworld, but astrology and human design give us a map, and they say, hey, you don't have to just figure it out on your own. You can kind of have these signposts that help you say, yes, I'm on the right path, or oh, maybe I need to go this way, or maybe I need to go that way. And it really makes it so much more efficient for a lot of reasons I've gone into in my shadow work videos that I have available on YouTube in my playlist about why the symbolic language of astrology, human design, and tarot as well are so powerful when we're doing shadow work, and how they make the process just not even just more efficient, but also more safe. It is such an amazing time to integrate everything that we've been seeing, the shadows we've been working on during the early weeks of October. I look forward to doing this shadow alchemy with you. I'll see you there.